You know, one of the best ways to keep some of those hard-earned dollars in your pocket and help protect our environment at the same time is by keeping your engine tuned up. Hi, I'm Scott Cusey, and I'll be your narrator and host as we demonstrate how easy it is to do your own engine tune-up. So how do you save money? By actually spending money on tune-up parts? It's simple. As your spark plugs and ignition system age, they deteriorate, and so does the performance and economy of your vehicle. So each time you go to the gas pump, you'll be putting more gas in the tank for the same number of actual miles driven. Thus, you're spending more money than if you keep your engine tuned up. Also, an engine that's out of tune will not burn all of the fuel as efficiently inside the cylinders. So what happens to that excess fuel that doesn't get burned? Well, some of it is taken care of by the catalytic converter in the exhaust system, but in many cases, it is simply emitted into the air from the tailpipe. When that happens, we're certainly not doing any favors for our environment. Now, during this chapter, I'll show you the items needed to perform the basic tune-up tasks demonstrated on this tape. In Chapter 2, we'll cover the most common procedure associated with tune-ups when we demonstrate how to replace your spark plugs. It's a pretty easy task, but I'll show you some of the tips that I've used through the years to make the job go a little quicker and easier. In Chapter 3, we'll look at another item that's part of the ignition system directly related to the spark plugs, and those are the spark plug wires. During Chapter 4, we'll continue our work on the ignition system by inspecting and replacing the distributor cap and rotor. Now, many of today's vehicles are actually equipped with distributorless ignition systems, at which point they won't have a cap and rotor. But the majority of the vehicles still on the road today do have a distributor, so that's why we'll take a look at those items anyway. Now, during Chapter 5, we'll demonstrate how to adjust the ignition timing of a distributor-type vehicle, a procedure that should definitely be performed, especially if you have replaced some of the ignition components. Chapter 6 will cover a different area of the tune-up that often gets overlooked, and that is the air and breather filters. If these items are clogged with dirt and road debris, it'll definitely affect the operation of today's sensitive fuel management systems. So some of the typical maintenance items have to be considered as part of an engine tune-up also, and vice versa. In our final chapter, we'll demonstrate how quick and easy it is to remove and replace the PCV valve. Once again, it's an integral part of the overall operation of your engine, because a plugged PCV valve will affect certain sensors that contribute to the performance of your vehicle. Well, that wraps up the areas we'll be discussing. So now let's take a minute to review some of the items that you'll be using. Now, you're going to have a good set of hand tools. Now, most of them you probably already have in your toolbox, and that's going to include things like open and box end wrenches, both probably standard and metric, some ratcheting box wrenches, various pliers and diagonal cutting pliers you'll want to have around, some funnels, chisels, adjustable wrenches, real handy tool to have. Vice grips, also another handy tool, and you'll need a good set of screwdrivers to perform the basic items that we're covering on this tape. Now, there's a few more specialty tools that I want to just cover briefly here, just to familiarize you with the operation of them. First off, you're most likely going to need a 3/8 drive ratchet, similar to this one here, with an extension, maybe even a couple extensions that help you get into hard-to-reach places. And another item that helps you get into those spots is a swivel, or U-joint is what it's called, and it can really make the job go easier. Now, along with that, I suggest having a spark plug socket like this here. Couple reasons for that. Now, spark plug socket fits on the ratchet here. Neat option. The other thing you can do with a spark plug socket is actually use an open-ended wrench on it, like I'm doing here, to turn the spark plug out. Now, if it's a real difficult to get at one, you might have to do that. Okay? Another neat thing about spark plug sockets is the fact that they've got a little rubber grommet down inside of them. And what that rubber grommet does is it grips onto the spark plug like this, so when you're either installing it or removing it either direction, the spark plug isn't going to fall out, so that really kind of makes the job go easier. Now, along with that item, you're going to need a spark plug gapping gauge. Here's a typical type of gapping gauge. It's got the different size wires for the different spark plug gaps located around the outside of the gauge, and neat little tool on each end here to set the spark plug gap with. So it's kind of a handy tool to have. Now, if you've got a set spark plug gap and possibly adjust the valves during your engine tune-up, one of the things that you might want to consider is a gauge like this. Now, this has got your wire gauges right here for your spark plug gap, little tool to adjust that, and it's got the feeler type gauges for doing your valve adjustment. So another kind of nifty little tool that makes the job go easier. Another item you're going to have is a digital volt ohm meter. Now, you don't need the digital volt ohm meter necessarily for an engine tune-up, but there's a couple things incorporated into this meter that you are going to have. First thing is a dwell meter, and this one's got scales for all the way from 8-cylinder to 4-cylinder. And the reason that you might need a dwell meter on early vehicles is to actually use the dwell meter to set the point dwell once you've installed points. If you got a late model carbureted vehicle with a computer, you might need that dwell meter to make some of the adjustments on the carburetor itself. Now, the other thing you're going to need that's incorporated onto this meter is right up here, and that is the RPM scale or tachometer. And the reason that you need a tachometer is so you can adjust your idle speed correctly, because the correct idle speed is important for adjusting your ignition timing. Which brings me to my next tool, and that is a timing light. Basically shaped like a pistol. It's got a xenon bulb in here. It's got a trigger on it that you pull when you're adjusting your timing. Pretty simple item to use. Got a couple of clamps here. One's got to go positive and one's got to go negative on the battery. Not too difficult. And the other nice thing that this light incorporates is an inductive pickup. And what that does is it senses when you're actually firing the spark plug through the spark plug wire. So inductive pickup just clamps simply around the spark plug wire, number one in almost all cases, and really makes it kind of easy versus pulling the plug wire off and inserting a tool. So you might want to have a timing light that's got this inductive clamp on it if you haven't already got one. A couple safety items I just want to talk about. Whenever you're working underneath the vehicle or you're working with power tools, a very important item to have is eye protection, whether it's in the form of safety glasses like this, or if you're already wearing glasses, you might want to get a pair of goggles that go down over them, because you really want to protect your eyes. They only gave you one set of eyes to use, so make sure that you keep them and protect them properly. Another item is right here, and that is a fire extinguisher. It's important to have a fire extinguisher handily located inside your garage, because if you've ever had a quick flash fire on a fuel system or anything like that when you're working on your vehicle, and I have, boy, I was sure thankful there was a fire extinguisher close by. The last item that I always suggest having in your tool set is a manual. And it's kind of nice to get a manual like this that is tailored for your specific vehicle. That'll have in it tune-up specs and many of the other procedures that pertain directly to your vehicle versus just a generic type of manual. So a manual like this is really kind of a nice item to have. Well, lastly, I'd like to thank you for choosing Car Care Seminar to help you learn more about your car. And before you start your next project, check to see if there's a Car Care Seminar tape to help you do the job the right way, the first time and every time. Now, let's get started with the first step to a better running engine. The tools you will need to replace your spark plugs include a socket set, a spark plug socket, either 13/16 or 5/8, or an extended 5/8 socket for some late model General Motors applications. We also suggest